Welcome. It's good to have you here. Really glad you could make it. We have a half-hour guided meditation followed by a talk. Tonight's topic is on awakening. What does awakening mean? What does it mean to be woke on a couple different levels? I'd like to invite you to take this time to settle in. I hope you can put aside everything that needs to be put aside so you can take this time to settle in. Before we begin, a couple thank yous. First to Ira. Thank you for playing piano before class. I know it's such a sweet, sweet offering. Thank you to our mindful movement teacher today. Thank you as well to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo for producing this evening. And thank you as well to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy, who offer mindful dialogue after this session. If you're wanting the whole smorgasbord experience for Monday night, you can check out my Facebook page and my webpage for more information on those Zoom classes. To do a movement class beforehand and mindful dialogue after, when you can reflect on the talk, connect with others, share about your practice. It's a really cool offering. I'm grateful to everyone who helps to make that happen. And as well, thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this class, and to my good friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, where for the past decade or so we have met on Monday nights, and where someday, once again, we will meet in person. You can sign up to get on the mailing list via my website for updates on classes and resources. I inflict some of my creative ventures on you as well. And just a reminder as well, this is offered in the spirit of Dharma, or generosity. That is to say, the teachings and the practices are considered priceless, therefore there's no price. However, generosity is an important part of this practice, and just as I offer this freely, out of my love for this, you are welcome to support me and thereby support the Insight Meditation community and the Unitarian Universalist Church in Arlington for all the amazing work that they do. All my talks are online. If you have a topic you'd like me to cover, please feel free to send me an email, and I'd be happy to see if I can accommodate you. Before we begin, just to say how great it is to share these practices with so many people from all over the world. It's truly one of the positive and beneficial things of being connected via the internet and so forth. So you may want to set your cell phone or your mobile phone and anything else on stun so you won't be disturbed for this next period of time. We're going to start with a little contraction release, a little body scan, and then open into more and more spacious awarenesses over the course of this meditation. I have been asked by some people, why do you lead a body scan every time? And pretty much what I have found, at least in my own experience, is that, and particularly when I would teach live, being aware of at the end of the day, it's been a really, really long day. This is about moment-to-moment awareness, being aware of sensation. And sometimes we need a little extra guidance to bring our attention to what's actually happening on the inside. So as we move into this contraction release and the body scan, if it doesn't work for you, move it in the background. Feel free to ignore anything that I offer. We're going to move a little bit from kind of deep embodied inquiry into opening into more mindfulness or kind of non-judging awareness. We are kind of the open monitor of what's passing, and we'll take some time toward the end to explore the practices of really letting be, the practices of surrender, if you will. So if you'd like, you can close your eyes. And to begin with, to help just to bring attention more into the body, you can make your hands into fists. Tighten up your forearms, your biceps, your triceps, the muscles around the shoulders, muscles around the shoulder blades. Hold and squeeze. If you like, you can draw the navel in close to the belly and focus on the contraction. When you get a clear signal from your body, it's time to let go. Relax the breath and soften the arms, soften the hands, and soften your belly. And just notice if there's any sense of free-flowing sensation inside. And once again, we're going to move into contraction release. Tighten up the fists, the forearms, the biceps, the triceps, muscles around the shoulders, muscles around the shoulder blades. Draw your navel in toward your spine. And now draw your shoulders up close to your ear. Taking a long, deep breath and hold the breath. Could you squeeze a little tighter? Feel the full contraction. Listen to your body when your body's telling you to let go. And when you get that signal, soften, relax, drop your shoulders, relax down through your elbows. Soften the belly. Feel the palms. Just track the felt shift inside, the flow of sensation and feeling. One final time. You can begin to make your hands into fists. Tighten up the forearms, the biceps, the triceps, muscles around the shoulders, muscles around the shoulder blades. Draw the navel in toward the spine. Draw your shoulders up toward your ears. Taking a long, deep inhalation and hold the breath, and now draw all the muscles of your face up toward the tip of your nose. Make your face into a raisin. Hold and squeeze. And relax. Soften again. Relax the shoulders. Feel the weight of your arms down through the elbows, down to the palms. Could you soften your belly? And sense your whole body settling, relaxing into a deeper sense of homeostasis and inner balance. Taking this time to settle inside. As I mentioned, a body part. Let that part of the body begin to soften, relax. Just feel what's there. Sensing the scalp, the crown of the head. The forehead and temples. Scanning through the muscles of your face, could you let your face be expressionless? Feel the inside of your mouth. And can you feel the volume of your lips? And could you relax your tongue in a way that it fills your lower jaw? And could you relax the root of your tongue down into your throat while softening through your jaw? And sensing the back of the head. And the base of the skull. And can you sense the space inside the sinus cavities in your head? Can you sense the space inside your mouth? The space between your upper teeth and your lower teeth? And the space inside your throat? And the space now inside your lungs. And the left shoulder and the left shoulder blade. The right shoulder and the right shoulder blade. And letting your awareness now flow down the length of both arms simultaneously. Can you sense now down through the elbows? Down through the wrists. Sensing from the inside the palm of your left hand. The palm of your right hand. The space inside your left thumb. And the space inside your right thumb. And sensing the volume and the weight of both hands. Sensing now the lungs and the heart. The lower back and the buttocks. The belly. Perhaps resting your attention here at the belly and noting the subtlety, the movement of your breathing. And sensing deeper, lower into the lower abdomen. And the floor of the pelvis and the hip joints. And sensing now the weight and the volume of your left leg. The hip joint down through the knee. The knee down through the ankle. The top of the foot and the toes. The sole of the foot and the heel. And sensing the weight and the volume of the opposite leg from the hip joint down through the knee. The knee down through the ankle. The top of the foot and the toes. And the sole of the foot and the heel. And sensing through the whole of the body. Is there anything that could relax or soften right now? Opening into this space of deep relaxation and alertness. And from here, escorting your attention to an anchor of breath or sound, maybe the felt sense in the hands. And for this next period of time, letting your primary attention be on the experience here at the point of your anchor or point of concentration. The breath in the belly or the nostrils, or wherever you feel the breath the most predominant. Or the aliveness of the sound vibrations around you. Or in the palms, any sense of pulse or tingling aliveness. Relaxed and alert. Drawing your attention back again and again to the sense of aliveness here. You may notice as you begin again and again, relaxing, coming in contact with your point of concentration, perhaps a heightened sense of the witness or the observer, your capacity to observe through this lens of non-judging awareness. And you may notice as well a natural widening of awareness. Perception of what is changing and how you are relating to it. And as it feels right for you, you might explore what it's like to move from concentration to mindfulness, from one pointed gathering of attention to a wider, broader perspective on all that is changing, as well as the attitude in your mind. And here you'll be toggling from noticing when the mind is lost to coming back, relaxing, re-arriving at your point of concentration, and then again broadening, widening, and opening into the perception of change. What are you noticing right now? Could you name it in a word or two? And is it possible to let it be? In these remaining 5 minutes or so, you might refresh or perhaps deepen the practice. Again, sensing on the inside, the face expressionless, the forehead smooth. Could you relax your tongue, the lips, the inside of your mouth? And can you feel the weight, the volume of your arms and hands and thumbs and fingers? Sensing the lower back and the buttocks. And the belly, the lower abdomen, and the floor of the pelvis. And feel the weight and the volume of your legs. The tops of your feet and toes, and the soles of the feet and the heels. This inner space of deep relaxation and presence. And you might, if you like, in your own way, let any sense of concentration or focus or manipulation to melt away. Feel or imagine the space in which anything and everything can take form, change, and pass away. Infinite space. Awake, and at the same time allowing. And what could relax or soften or let go right now? And what could relax or soften or let go even more? And imagine, if you could, in this remaining minute, let all technique fall away. And simply sense what it's like to rest in presence with whatever is here, to deeply and intimately let it be. And you might now very, very gently notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And then lengthen the inhalation just a little bit and sense how intimately you can feel the breath on the inside. Sense this quality of relaxation and alertness. With your eyes closed, you might let your head drift just slightly to the left and slightly to the right. Let your body begin to move and stretch in any way that feels good for you. Take the next little while just to let your body respond. You might like to relax, you might like to stretch. Welcome. This is coming to you from an undisclosed basement in New England. Grateful to have this time with you. A number of years ago, I was teaching at a center in Colorado that was based on the teachings of a Tibetan teacher. In that particular tradition, they had some pretty radical ways of exploring waking up. Sometimes in this tradition known as being relatively brutal is not the right word, but kind of in your face. So I was leading a five-day retreat, and as I was going through the line to return your dishes, I noticed that none of the bins were labeled as to where you put your fork or your knife or your plate or your spoon or your bowl. And as I was going along the line, there was kind of this kind of older, kind of wizened yogi, managing the plates and so forth. And I said, I held my bowl. I said, "Where does this go?" And he looked at me and said, "Pay attention." And my response was, it was twofold. One was anger. Like, thanks for the welcome, buddy. You're here as a program center, and you're shaming people when they don't know where to put their stuff because you didn't bother to put labels up. But on the other hand, I smiled internally because, oh yeah, that's what this tradition is all about, Pay attention, wake up. I'd like to talk about paying attention, waking up for this talk, about what waking up means. And you can view waking up as kind of a relational waking up, and then kind of a political awakening up, which is part of that, but then waking up, which is waking up to reality. I'd like to talk a little bit kind of the consequences of an unexamined life, and a little bit about kind of the organic process of awakening, as well as inclining your mind and inclining your life toward what it means to be awake. So, what does it mean to be awake? There was a time, a couple decades ago, when all the great ashrams fell. All these great teachers came from the East to the West to teach. And as Ram Dass said in one of his jokes, that all the Westerners went to the East to get enlightened, and a lot of the Easterners came to the West to teach and got horny. There was a lot of sexual impropriety and kind of monetary abuse in a lot of these spiritual communities. And it wasn't just the ashrams. It was schools and churches and synagogues and businesses. There was like this outing of abuse. And it happened in my community as well. Our entire community kind of fell apart and dissolved and had to reform in a radically different formation. And it really brings up this question of, are we waking up as a culture? I like to think we are. I have my doubts, for sure, as I look around now. But we have this term, which you may have heard of woke, or stay woke. When someone is woke, what does that mean? It's not really a new term. It's been around. It's actually in the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, since 1917. And it's about being aware, knowing what's going on in your community, which is related to racism and social injustice. So to stay woke means to stay awake to the sensitive social issues like racism. So life on the planet looks different than it did eons ago. And the author Steven Pinker makes an argument saying that the world is getting much, much better and not worse. We're far better off than we have been, he says. But we're not paying attention. We're not noticing that life is so much better. He said that the advanced benefits we are experiencing are being wasted on the crappiest generation of spoiled idiots. I love that line. That the advanced benefits in our culture are being wasted on one of the crappiest generations of spoiled idiots. He goes on to say that existential angst is on the rise, innovation and technology are pushing us into the unknown, but compared to just a century ago, our lives are a picnic. Part of the worldview we get is from data, where we can see how much less conflict there is, health, and so forth. But then we also have this worldview of journalism, which is a whole other conversation. And the journalistic view, according to him, is that basically saying if we don't focus on the dangers, that would be naive. So we have this kind of built-in negativity bias, where we're sort of anticipating the worst. But at the same time, is it possible that there is a waking up? Is there some kind of vibrational shift going on? I had a very tangible sense of this, and my gosh, this is 30 years ago. When I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa, I was visiting some friends who were rangers in a game park. Out in the middle of nowhere, no electricity anywhere. And their little house was right on the edge of the game park. So we would kind of go wander in and look at the wildlife and so forth. But what really blew my mind was right next to their little house, there was a solar panel. And again, this is 30 years ago. And it was hooked up to a satellite TV. And the whole village would gather around in the evening to watch French game shows. So I'd be trying to fall asleep. And I'd hear this, hey, qu'est-ce qu'il a gagné? And all this applause and so forth. It's like, oh my gosh, we are getting more connected here. And more connected from all those years, way back when in my lifetime. So as we're getting more awoke to each other, maybe there's a collective sensitivity that we're cultivating. And there's another element to it though, is like waking up to our true nature. This beautiful little line I saw from a writer, Yolo Akili, who said, "Sometimes I have to wake up and remind myself there's nothing wrong with me. There are things to unlearn. There are new behaviors to embody and want to heal. But it's nothing essentially wrong with me. There are generations of healing that I have to overcome, and it takes time." And that's another kind of woke, is recognizing our deep internal true nature. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Waking up as a species, but also waking up individually. The teacher Adyashanti says this. He says it means waking up to what you truly are and then being that. You realize and be. Realization is not enough. After self-realization, one must act, do, and express what one has realized. This is a whole new way of life. Living in reality instead of living out of the programmed ideas, beliefs, and impulses of your mind. So you have a realization or a vision of what's possible in your life. And sometimes, most often, there are glimpses. And then, of course, we have a tendency to kind of fall back into slumber. So part of understanding waking up means we have to kind of sense what does it mean to not be awake. I know I've shared this with you before, but there are so many different models that speak to this map of waking up. And one of the most ones I was deeply impressed by was through the Hare Krishnas, where they had this little model that they haul around for their demonstration booths and so forth, where they show a little child who starts to stand. The next model is him walking. The next model is him being a young boy. The next model is as a young man. The next model is as the warrior. The next model is as he's more mature. And as this comes around in a circle, then the aging, and then the dying, and then the rebirth back into this endless cycle of becoming, this endless cycle of desire. And so when we look around, our world is very much built on this sense of chasing after desire. The mind has been described as a drunken monkey, stung by scorpions, just wanting, lurching toward what it wants, stung by pain. And much of our life is driven by that sense of desire. This is going to make me happy. I'm going to go for this now. One of my teachers talked about how when we're young, we think, boy, if I could just get into a relationship, then I'd be happy. And then you're in a relationship and you realize, maybe kids would help us in this relationship. And then it becomes, when the kids are gone, I think things are going to be a lot better around here. And then it's, if I could just get out of this relationship, then I'll be happy. There's a process in our lives when we start to recognize that a life simply chasing sensations in order to fulfill that sense of happiness isn't going to get us anywhere. And that recognition is part of waking up. When you look at the words of the Buddha, at least the translation of the words, there's this phrase of the average run-of-the-mill person. Many, many references to that. So run-of-the-mill is sort of ordinary, kind of uninterested in reality. Another translation of putujana is a worldling, someone who believes this world is real, someone who believes this world is permanent. The Buddha said, I don't envision a single thing that, when untamed, unguarded, unprotected, and unrestrained, leads to such great harm as the mind. The mind, when untamed, unguarded, unprotected, unrestrained, leads to harm. And going on to this phrase, I don't envision a single thing that, when tamed, guarded, protected, and restrained, leads to such great benefit as the mind. The mind, when tamed, guarded, protected, restrained, leads to great benefit. When we don't tame the mind, when the mind is just free to chase unbridled after pleasure, caught in this endless cycle of desire, there's a deep, deep sense of perpetuated suffering and stress, unpleasantness, dissatisfaction. And so we have this view that begins to point toward what it means to wake up. And 4 things. Recognizing, this is the translation from a Buddhist chant. The world as we know it is swept away. It does not endure. The world offers no shelter. There is no one in charge. The world has nothing of its own. One has to pass on, leaving everything behind. The world is insufficient, insatiable, a slave to craving. Those are pretty hard realities. The world as we know it, it's swept away. The world as we know it offers no shelter. The world owns nothing. When you leave this world, you leave everything you know and love behind. And the world is insatiable. Those are harsh. And naturally, of course, we want to take comfort in the illusion that this world, if we just keep satisfying our senses, we're going to be okay. If we create stories that make us feel good, that we can take refuge in those. But no matter what story, no matter what pursuit of desire you have, inevitably we get these glimpses of reality. And we experience them in different ways. Sometimes it's the death of a loved one. Sometimes it's getting really, really sick and coming to the edge of death. Sometimes it comes with age as we begin to recognize that what we know and love is going to fall away. Sometimes it comes in like a slap to the face. Pay attention. In my own practice, I have had glimpses, sometimes kind of sustained glimpses, and sometimes in very inconvenient ways. And one of the more dramatic ones I experienced was a number of years ago, out walking barefoot in the woods with a friend. I got stung by a honeybee. And I stopped to take the stinger out, and not realizing that in trying to take the stinger out, I actually squeezed the bulb and gave myself a full injection. We continued walking for a couple miles, and we kind of made our way down to where there were some other people kind of hanging out. And by the time we got there, I was getting very, very flushed and feeling a little woozy. And someone there saw me and said, "Hey, I'd like to give you a ride back." And I demurred and said I'd be happy to walk. And I'm very grateful they insisted that they give me a ride back, because I wouldn't be here if they hadn't. I was beginning to go into anaphylactic shock from that bee sting. To make a long story short, another friend drove me into the hospital who had been a medic in Vietnam and kept an eye on me and knew what was going on. And as we were driving to the hospital, I began to watch my perception of time begin to shift quite dramatically. I was very aware that my story wasn't really making sense anymore. I had a moment when I from the driver's seat, I saw a woman on a street corner in slow motion, just bringing her hand up to her face in ultra slow motion. And as she was doing that, I just glanced over at the speedometer, and we were going 90 miles an hour downtown. I noticed I could remember some faces, but I couldn't put names on those faces. And then I couldn't even remember faces, just this sense of a kind of a widening chasm of space and emptiness. At one point I thought to myself, hey, I think I'm graduating early. There was really a little bit of humor there. And I thought, well, maybe this is when I should start chanting. So I did a couple of chants, and suddenly I felt a huge amount of pain. I thought, forget that, no more chanting. And I had a very, very powerful experience as I slipped from consciousness of feeling this world as I know it completely disbanding. The next thing that I recall is looking down on a body, which I didn't recognize was mine until later, and seeing 6 people working on my body, and someone calling out what they needed, the IVs wide open, calling out blood pressure and so forth, and thinking to myself, this is a slab of meat, that they're not bringing this body back, unless it's God's will or something. And then suddenly it felt like I fell from the ceiling onto the table, and I heard the doctor's voice in my right ear say, "He's back, we got him." That was the beginning of a profound shift in my awareness. That sense of awareness without a body, if you will. So along those lines, I'd like to offer a short little reflection, which I have found helpful for myself. This will be just for a few minutes. If you like, you can close your eyes. And if you would, with your eyes closed, take 3 deep breaths. And can you imagine, as you breathe, of what your experience is like inside, transcendent of hearing? If you couldn't hear, what is your internal experience? What would your experience be transcendent of sight if you couldn't see? What would your experience be if you could not smell? Can you imagine what your experience would be if you could not taste? And can you imagine what your experience would be if you could not feel? And take a few moments just to sense, who are you in the absence of hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and feeling? If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. And I'm really curious what that was like for you, just that inquiry into what is there in the absence of the senses. As I found myself from that kind of deep space of feeling the world, I know it, go out, the lights go out, the sense of emptiness, and suddenly being back in a world that I had known well before, there was a deep depression that followed. The world, the stories I was living in, they just didn't have the same grip that happened before. Over time, there was a very, very interesting shift, but I noticed that I could be very, very present. And at that time, I was working as a hands-on body healer, of doing different forms of modalities and it was so clear to me where the energy was blocked. I could see it very, very clearly, and people having very, very powerful experiences, but I was devoid of any emotion. And then I heard something very, very powerful from one of my teachers who said that love is a secondary manifestation of presence. That it's only when you're fully and deeply present that love can begin to flow. And I always judged myself for not being as loving a person as I should be. But when I realized I had a taste of what it means to be present, I began to feel empathy and compassion begin to flow in a way I really hadn't felt it before. And there's an interesting thing about waking up, as I understand it, which is probably deeply flawed and filled with hallucinations, that in the moments of awakening, it's not like you become aware. It's like eternity becomes aware. Something outside the ego, whatever you want to call it, life or God or the totality of all being, becomes more self-aware. And from there, that sense of love and presence begins to flow. For me, as I felt my story fall away, as I saw the names and faces of people I knew and who were important to me fall away, and I began to feel a vast spaciousness begin to not overwhelm me, but entering into that sense of vast impersonal spaciousness. It really was like this sense of something is waking up through me. As I fall away, there's more room for light. There's more room for love, ultimately. And this sense of like how, as we let go of the self, again, as the Buddha allegedly said, nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. When the sense of I and mine falls away, something more vast arises, and we realize that spaciousness is who we are. And that sense that consciousness is something greater than who we are, and that's what we're waking up to. One teacher who talks quite a bit about awakening talks about how life just kind of plays itself out until we wake up. He gave this great example from Carl Jung, who said, God is unconscious. And there are these beautiful stories of God as this representation of enlightenment and awakening. But when you look at mythology, 80% of the stories are the gods and goddesses playing out all this drama. And amazing to think of how what we call God, what we call these representations of higher consciousness are just reflections of ourselves, of our desires, of greed, hatred, and delusion playing themselves out. When we wake up, we are waking up to something infinitely, infinitely vast. It's life itself that's waking up. We kind of think of ourselves like, I will awaken. But anyone who's woken up doesn't say that. They don't believe that. They almost say like the universe woke up through me. I know this sounds a little woo-woo. It's very easy to talk about this stuff and sound like you've been doing psychotropics recently. But what many people say, and my own sense of it is that this waking up is a collective waking up. There's some line, if I understand it correctly, where the Buddha said, I and all beings woke up. It's, again, we don't have the language to describe that experience of infinity. So why is all this important? When we have that experience, or I'll speak for myself, when I have that experience of no I and no mine, that mystical sense of presence, it is, on the one hand, it is absolutely terrifying. Some of the more terrifying experiences that I have had is that sense of the I, that little me, falling away. But also the most profound sense of surrender and release. We taste that in little pieces, and we want more. Any little sense of I and mine falling away, it's a high. That's where we get high. It's like really, really beautiful sex is I and mine falling away. Being on an adventure where you're totally absorbed, I and mine falls away. Being in nature, being with loved ones, I and mine falls away. Something in us is called to that because we recognize that there is something inherently truthful about that experience. And so we've had these experiences in little bits and pieces. Any moment you have probably had of a deep connection to the mystery is that sense of I and mine falling away. And they're glimpses. And quite often, I find it very, very helpful to think of those moments as moments. We have this conceptual idea around what being awake is, arriving in some final place where now we see it all and it's over and we can relax, when actually what many, many people say is we get a glimpse of reality and we come back and we realize the work we have to do. And so, part of the recognition of who we truly are, and every tradition brings us to that question of what are you? Waking up is realizing that what and who you are is that vast, infinite awareness itself. In an experience I had of that sense of I and mind falling away, and I went into that question, well, what am I? And I found myself almost shaking, where I said, well, am I God? Scary question. But when we have that sense of no I and no mind, it's like there is simply reality, and then who we are is that reality. One of the most informative books I read way back in college was from a writer kind of born in the 1800s, Evelyn Underhill, who wrote a book on mysticism. She was kind of a Catholic mystic, and that her life was about exploring this, and it was one of her most influential books. And the sum of the book is that when you look at mystics through all the ages, in all different traditions, they had the same experience, from what I can tell. They had the same experience, and then when their personality reforms, they're describing that experience according to their religion, according to their times, according to their personality structure. So part of what we're waking up to is this profound experience of reality. And then when we start to re-arrive as a separate sense of self, the only way we can describe it is through the language we're most familiar with. And so we have these paths to awakening, and there are so many different paths. But as someone said, all those paths, their fingers pointing at the moon. They're all pointing toward the same experience. There are different paths that talk about developing will and focus and training and rigor. Others that talk about surrender and letting go. That path of will and focus is a tremendous way of refining our attention. Michael Jordan, he said, I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times when I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I have failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And that speaks so beautifully to what spiritual practice means. Kind of what we're aiming for is that sense of realization. What we're aiming for is, what am I truly? When the I and mind fall away, what's left? So every time you sit down and meditate, you could say on some level you're failing. Maybe you're calming, maybe you're concentrating, but are you coming to that pure sense of realization and to reality? Another teacher, Michael Singer, wrote a book called The Surrender Experience. He talks of how, he says, my formula for success was very simple. Do whatever is put in front of you with all your heart and soul, without regard for personal results. Do the work as though it was given to you by the universe itself, because it was. That profound sense of saying yes to life becomes the doorway. So what do we have when we talk about waking up? Well, one thing we have is to look at those who've walked before us. And this is the power of looking toward what others have recorded in their experience. A friend of mine talks the analogy of a coral reef, that when you visit a coral reef, what you're seeing is basically the skeletons of generations upon generations upon generations. And what you see that's alive is the very kind of the outer edge, the living element of that coral reef before it dies, and then more coral is built on top of that. And where we are in our lives as practitioners is we are that living part of the reef right now. But we can look back and reflect on what others have noted before us, which is the power of self-study. So if waking up means that the universe is waking up through us, that points toward some very interesting doorways. If each of us is just one tiny little constellation, if one person wakes up, we automatically impact each other. How could we not? And so here we have some really beautiful, beautiful teachings. And I'd like to kind of end with some of these, and we'll end with a little meditation, one of my very favorite readings. Different traditions speak of the power of seeing self in other and other in self. Now, the illusion is that we're separate, that we're a wave cut off from the ocean. But when you wake up, you realize that you are the ocean and you are that wave. And that realization only comes through either a very profound or a very, very simple shift in consciousness of recognizing the interconnectivity of seeing self and other in self. And so we have the practice of metta in this tradition, the well-wishing, of wishing for all beings what you wish for yourself. The practice of generosity. When the Buddha said, if you knew what I know about generosity, you would never hesitate to share what you have. It is that recognition of our interconnectivity, our interbeing. And as the teacher Adyashanti said, it's one thing to realize that, it's another thing to act on that. So the offering of well-wishing is a profound doorway to awakening. The principle of seva, or selfless service. Again, that whatever is in front of you, to give yourself to it fully, to remove the self as you serve, becomes a profound way of awakening. When I talk with people about their struggles at work and how much they don't like work, and I just ask, what if your work was a spiritual practice? What if you took on work as an opportunity to wake up, to explore selfless service, to see work as an opportunity to serve and get yourself out of the way? What would that be like? Sometimes you've definitely got to dump where you are. Sometimes that can be a very profound shift. Like, I'm here to serve. I'm here to help. I'm here to make other people look good. There's a profound process of waking up that occurs when you initiate an approach like that. In yoga, there's the principle of treating the guest as God, as whoever is in front of you, view them as a manifestation of God. Or as one of my teachers said, the key to your own heart is locked inside the heart of another. It's through our very interconnectivity, perhaps, that we begin to recognize that we are not waking up, but we are awareness waking up through us. I'd like to close with two readings. One is a reflection on unlimited friendliness from the Buddha, or translation of the Buddha's words. And the final is one of my favorite readings from one of my dear friends, Danna Faulds, which actually alludes to the title of this talk. So if you like, you can close your eyes. Reflect on these instructions as a vehicle for waking up. This is what should be done by the person who is wise, who seeks the good, and who knows the meaning of the place of peace. Be strenuous, upright, and truly straight, without conceit of self. Be easily contented and joyous. And be not submerged by the things of the world. Do not take upon yourself the burden of worldly goods. Let your senses be controlled. Be wise, but not puffed up. Do nothing that is mean or that the wise would reprove. May all beings be happy and at ease. May they be joyous in life and live in safety. All beings, whether weak or strong, omitting none, in high, middle, or low realms of existence, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far away, born or yet to be born, may all beings be happy and at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none be angry or wish ill will to another. Even as a mother watches over and protects her child, her only child, so with a boundless mind should one cherish all living beings, radiating friendliness over the entire world, above, below, and all around without limit. Cultivate a boundless goodwill toward the entire world, uncramped, free from ill will or enmity, standing or walking, sitting or lying down, during all your waking hours. This person is made perfect and will never again know rebirth. I'm closing with this poem from Danna Faulds. As you reflect on your individual path and this shared path we inevitably all walk together, this poem is entitled Walk Slowly. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still. And just like that, something in me settles, softens, makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper, and I remember again that life is not a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we were born for. As many times as I forget, catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going, that many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe and be, and walk slowly into the mystery. You might take these moments to wish yourself well in your journey, and to imagine you could take that well-wishing and radiate it all in all directions to all beings. And to sense your willingness to be awake, to let the mystery wake up through you. And as you're ready, you can gently deepen your breath. And as you're ready, you can let your eyes open. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. As challenging as life can be, may this be a time of waking up, of recognizing what is true, and then taking that into the world. Thank you again. Many, many blessings.